Motherland has arrived, and fortunately I am Superman of Doom. The people of the Motherland have come, and it's good that I am Superman of Doom. Chapter 51. Time limit, indefinite, will definitely go to you. Meng threw down this sentence. His eyes were red and almost formed an actual burning flame, and he turned around without hesitation, and a hurricane dust explosion was stirred up in place. Countless fallen leaves flying. Syllable. The car door was pushed open from the inside out, and the girl Tifa rushed out of the car, and the crystal in her eyes came out of her eyes, turning into tears across her delicate face. Gradually blurred vision. The silver-haired boy who completely transformed into a bone spur monster broke through the sound barrier and jumped high to the modern city shrouded in fog thousands of meters away. Until the grey back disappeared. 0057 The city falls, and disaster incarnates. Inside Trina City. The incomparably huge and indescribable sheep-like creatures walk in the fog, like the black shadows of mountains that span the world, and the buildings and infrastructure they pass are destroyed. And it is difficult to see the true faces but make people feel desperate. Humans. How to fight against such giants? Suddenly. A bright flame lit up in the fog, bursting from inside the military base, dragging the tail flame into the fog in front of it at great speed, right in the head of the sheep-like creature. Rumble. The next moment. A blast of light and heat erupted, blowing away the fog high in front of you, and even if you covered your ears, you could feel the hum and feel the oncoming strong wind and aftermath. It's modern missile fire. Inside the base, Pan-Hu looked up, his eyes reflecting the brilliant and powerful bombing scene. Can it succeed? No. It must be successful. Quote. Pan-Hu's fists clenched hard. He knew that in the city that was now shrouded in fog and isolated from the outside world, modern missiles were already the last killer tool for local military bases. If even modern missiles cannot effectively combat the presence in the fog, then, under the eyes of countless survivors who are equally full of expectation and hope. The black shadow of the sheep-like creature in the distance and near paused, and then continued to move forward without incident, completely destroying the temporary fire defense line established by the military base, and naturally and cruelly pushed forward. Rustling. Losing fire suppression, a previously repelled fog tentacle monster continued to emerge in the fog, and the same huge body proportions of mist bugs, mist birds, mist spiders, mist praying mantis. Following the movement of this side swarming, they surrounded the base, taking the lead in crushing the armed soldiers armed with guns on the perimeter, and then crossed the line. Suddenly, the military base that was originally the last, safe zone, of the city fell at a very fast speed, and tens of thousands of survivors fled in panic. Whether it is a commander, a soldier, a politician, or a giant businessman, under the fog of its own biological system, it is only the target of hunting. And human beings are sometimes more vulnerable than they think. Screams and wails, killings and deaths play out around every corner. No. Wang Xuan's eyes were cracked, and he looked at his parents, who were still standing beside him a moment ago, and were swallowed away by two large tentacles sticking out of the fog. Brother, save me. Not far away, a bespectacled Sven man was thrown to the ground by a misty bird. Wang Xuan was trembling all over, and a moment of hesitation flashed in his eyes, and finally he rushed over, reached out and grabbed a suitcase next to the Sven man. And then quickly fled in the direction of the outskirts of the city. Save me. Yes. The Sven man was still struggling, but was sprayed by another misty bird with a mouthful of venom, and the blood and flesh of his neck quickly melted. And the strength of resistance and struggle continued to weaken. Sorry. I will live well for you. I will not let our royal family be defeated in my generation. Wang Xuan had tears in his eyes, and the suitcase he was dragging in his hand was constantly shaking, as if it contained a living animal. And there was a faint sound of steam and grinding teeth inside. Give me peace of mind. You will be my capital to start in other cities in the future. After all, I gave birth to you. Wang Xuan's handsome face struggled a little, and he roared low, covering his abdomen to overcome his fear and flee out. At this moment, in the crisis of life and death, there are not a few people like this. Of course, there are also people who sacrifice themselves and stand up. Dad. Mom. A little girl about 10 years old fell to the ground, her innocent little face stained with dust, and looked at the chaotic base around her in fear. The fog surged and a misty bird slammed down on her from the fog. Be careful. At the moment of the attack, a dark and burly teenager pounced, holding the little girl and rolling around a few times, which was able to avoid the attack of the misty bird. The misty bird screamed and wanted to continue pursuing, but as if sensing something, it suddenly flew out in panic. A suffocating shadow fell into the base clearing. Pan-Hu held the little girl and looked up, his eyes showing despair. It was a huge hoof. A giant black sheep's hoof, the size of a tall tower, fell from the fog, like a human trampling ant when walking. In the face of such a giant existence, all struggle and resistance are superfluous. Death. Follow the shadows and fall down. Pan-Hu hugged the little girl tightly, his eyes were closed, but he found that after a few seconds, he was still alive. This is. Pan-Hu's eyes widened in disbelief. But see. The huge black sheep's hooves that shrouded the open space of the base stopped at a low altitude of about 10 meters from the base. And a terrifying cry that made people deranged immediately exploded from the fog-covered base. Just now, the sheep-like giant, which was ineffective even with missile bombing, now actually emits real screams and mournful screams. Under the dull gaze of the survivors at the scene, the sheep-like giant that stepped into the base was hit like a heavy blow, and fell towards the city behind it with a sad cry. Bang! Pieces of buildings were dumped and crushed into ruins by sheep-like giants, the entire city shook and the dust waves set off countless survivors unable to open their eyes. No one knows what happened in the fog, and what factors or existence could have caused this terrifyingly huge Optimus creature to fall to the ground. But many survivors with a strong desire to escape still seized this opportunity and fled in the suburban direction behind the base. Thank you. Thank you. A couple with red eyes thanked and took the little girl in Pan-Hu's arms. No thanks. Pan-Hu struggled to get up, and by the time he looked up, the couple had already taken the little girl and followed the crowd of survivors and hurriedly disappeared into the fog. I should go too. Pan-Hu took a deep breath. He had wanted to continue to wait here, but now he could only evacuate out of the city. And then use the relationship of his own officer and uncle to confirm the current situation of the boss and Meng. At the moment when Pan-Hu turned around and was about to leave. Rumble. It was like a meteorite falling heavily from the air on the open space not far away, and the accompanying strong wind and dust waves lifted some of the white fog. Pan-Hu subconsciously looked sideways, and his pupils suddenly froze. It is indescribable what kind of existence it is in front of you, nearly 2 meters tall, full of perfect muscle curves of the exoskeleton. The muscles and flesh and grey cold bone white shape of the same hard armor, and barely maintain a slender and strong human shape. But the back sticks out one after another hideous and sharp grey and white bone spurs. On his body, he was still wearing a pair of trousers whose legs were already tattered, and a petite and delicate demon doll was hanging firmly from his waist. The human-shaped bone spur seemed to sense Pan-Hu on one side, and when he turned his head slightly, his eyes surged with endless scorching and violent red flames of destruction. And the momentum emerged. The temperature in the area suddenly soared by more than 10 degrees. Pan-Hu was like falling into an ice warehouse, not daring to move, not daring to look directly, as if he was being looked at by the most terrifying abyss. The humanoid bone spur existence did not pay attention to him, and the momentum of violent destruction lingered all over his body. Like the embodiment of destruction, every move is a disaster. The air and sound burst together in place, and with the storm that opened up, the earth sank into a deep pit, and the fog along the way burst open. Humanoid bone spurs existed, and just like that, they jumped into the distance again, trying to get up. Only the invasion can be resisted. 0058 Reality ends, everything ends. Songnam, where the Paranormal Division branch is located. The inside and outside of the building was a mess, full of corpses of agents and misty monsters. Hold on a little longer, hold on a little longer. Yingzi, who was wearing a police uniform, gritted her teeth and insisted, her beautiful pale face was full of sweat. And carried the male detective who had broken a hand and passed out to the first floor. And except for her and the injured and unconscious supernatural agent, the agents who remained in the department have all died in the line of duty. And Eiko has also reached the limit of her physical strength. She accidentally stepped on the empty steps with one foot. And rolled down the stairs to the floor of the first floor with the agent on her back. The detective, who was already seriously injured, was really on the line of life and death this time. Eiko tried it, but she didn't even have the strength to get up from the ground. Can anyone help me? Eiko struggled to open her eyes and look at the fog outside the doorway, only a dead silence that responded to her. Can anyone help? Confused in consciousness, Yingzi Ghost touched the white bone horn worn on his neck, and gently blew it on the corner of his pale lips. First chapter previous chapter 51 140th next chapter epilogue table of contents.